Well, thank you. And there's a typo in the program. It's actually sensoryscapes, because that's a word I created. They probably couldn't find storyscapes. In November, Jean entered the hospital, and she stayed there for quite a while. And her family gathered on December 20th to try to make it festive for Christmas, but also probably to say goodbye. There was about 12 people in the room, and she was struggling with all of the pain medication that she was on, and she was going kind of in and out of consciousness, and her grandson pulled his violin out to play some Christmas songs for her, and her sons were gathered around, and there was some daughter-in-laws in the room, and as he started with the squeaky rendition of Silent Night, her husband kind of leaned over her, and he gently touched her cheek and brushed the hair out of her face and whispered something to her, probably to wake her up. She was in there for complications with diabetes and heart trouble, and she'd had her legs amputated, and she didn't look good. But that gesture, a daughter-in-law observed and was so touched, also very sad, that she had to walk out of the room. This experience was the genesis of this speech, and so are a lot of others that I'm going to share with you tonight about creating powerful moments in our life through our five senses and becoming more aware of the messages that they send. A sensoryscape, and like I said, I kind of created this word because it's based on our landscape around us, but it's a landscape of our senses and how it starts to shape who we are. I was the daughter-in-law that was in that hospital room that saw that moment, and I've looked back as I have reflected on that if I hadn't been there to see that happen, I would have missed out on an opportunity to see a very powerful and intimate moment of what real love is, and that showed me how you create a relationship that lasts over 50 years. And it is one that I fall back on many times in my life when I'm struggling or when I need a boost to make me remember that that's the kind of love that I want in my life. William James wrote an essay called On Vital Reserves, and in it he talks about how most of us go through our life not using enough energy to pay attention to the things that are happening around us. So my question to you is, how do we live a life that is more vitally alive? How do we be more vitally aware? And how do we be awake to the things that are happening around us? I don't want to go through my life being numb to the experiences that are presenting themselves. And Erickson did a study and said that all of the things that we know come because of our five senses. So really think about that. Every piece of knowledge that you've had to attend to with one of your senses. My goal is that we try to focus a little bit more on how those senses can teach us. So I have a question. Can our sensory experiences change us mentally, physically, psychologically, emotionally? This little girl was severely neglected the first year of her life. This is her at 14 months. She was taken out of her home. She weighed 11 pounds. When they took her out of her home, she could barely raise her little arms above her head. Her parents, don't know them, but did the best they could, I guess, but they would keep her in a car seat, give her milk with Benadryl in it so she'd sleep. She's got a flat little head because of that experience. And some great aunts took her out of the home and terminated parental rights. And this beautiful little girl ended up at our home. And I honestly believe that the experiences that she's having have changed who she was going to become, because I really think that powerful sensory moments can alter the architecture of our brain and can do it in very positive ways if we're paying attention. The first sense that I want to talk about, and my goal is to take each sense and connect it to a word that you can relate to. And the first one I want to talk about is touch. And I think how we connect with people, we do that through the sense of touch, and that we need to pay attention to those connections that we're making. Schanberg explained that touch affects a whole organism as well as everything that's around us in our culture. And I think it's kind of interesting that he also says that it's 10 times stronger than verbal or emotional things that can happen. So I really challenge you to think about your positive interactions with touch. And it seems like we think about little babies with this attachment and the failure to thrive if they don't have enough touch. But I honestly believe that if we don't have it in all of our interactions, parent-child, parent-teenager, in our spousal relationships, in our friendships, that they will have a failure to thrive. So I think we need to start thinking about how we can use positive touch to actually enrich our lives. And I think Dick and Jane had it wrong. I don't think the most powerful word is look. I actually think it's touch. And I love this picture because you can just see them with their little fingers. And that is how children learn about the world around them. It's how they make connections. It's how they interact with their world and learn, but it's also how they make connections with the people around them. A story that really showed me that it doesn't just stop at childhood was an experience I had with a colleague that I worked with. Her father was going to an old folks' home. Is that what they're called now? Sorry. A rest home. He needed some rehabilitative care. Sorry. And he needed some rest. He was older, and my grandpa was in there at the same time, and I didn't like the place. I think they're sad. I think they smell funny. I think they're too hot. And I asked her, how's your dad doing there? Because I knew my grandpa hated it and wanted to go home. She said, he loves it. And I said, what? She said, yeah, you remember my mom's been gone for 30 years, and he's been by himself. And he told me when I went in the other night, I love my sponge baths. And he said, I had almost, and it is kind of funny, but I had almost forgotten what the touch of a woman, or what the feel of a woman's touch was like, because he hadn't had it for 30 years on his skin. And it really was a powerful moment to me about how important touch really can be. I had the opportunity to go to Paris. It was actually, I was going to say a while ago, but it was about 20 years ago. And we went to the Rodin Museum, and I was so excited to go there to see the thinker. But when I got there and walked into the room, there was another sculpture that just blew my mind. And I stood by it. I don't know if it's because I was a single girl going to Rick's college, but but I decided when I saw that sculpture that that was the kind of relationship I wanted. And I read a beautiful book by Diane Ackerman called The Natural History of the Senses. And in it, she talks about Rodin's The Kiss, and she says that without a lot of touching, it's like they're touching every cell of their bodies together. And I think through connection and powerful touch, we can create intimate sensoryscapes. Taste is another one that I think, as I connected a word with it, really hits on the word to socialize. When we use our sense of taste, it's a very social sense because we use all 5 senses to taste. We see it, we touch it, we hear it in our mouth, we smell it, which is a huge part of taste. But I loved the idea of the social aspect of food. And I love this quote where he says that everything that we do socially, every kind of interaction that we have with people will happen at a table somewhere with food around it. And I started to think about that. As you can see, I like food, and my family likes food. And I'm starting to change, though, my opinion of how I look at it and try to make it something that is, I don't know, just more rich and deep. It's not just something to go through the motions because you have to eat. And one of the things that I was talking about with some friends is, do we really taste what we're eating? And I couldn't resist this apple. I saw it at Walmart, probably first mistake. No, they have some good ones sometimes. But it was beautiful. It was this big, and it was red, and I was suckered in by the shine and the color. And I got home, and I cut it open, and it was terrible. And most people would have continued eating it. I didn't. I threw it away, and I was mad that I got suckered into it. But I think we need to create traditions of getting good food. My family goes down every year to Brigham City to pick peaches, and my parents are huge gardeners. I do it once in a while. But I don't buy salsa anymore because we make it. I don't buy spaghetti sauce too often because we make it. And I was really shocked. You can see James and the giant peach right there. But when we pick those peaches off of the trees and take that bite, and it's running down your face and your arms, it's just a moment of bliss that I don't think we can replace. I think we need to be brave and try new things because that broadens our sensoryscape. I hate hot dogs. Just looking at them creeps me out. But I was going to New York, and I said I wanted to try a hot dog. So I was brave and put some sauerkraut on it so I wouldn't have to taste the hot dog. And then I took a bite, and it was terrible. But I was brave, and if I had let that experience stop me, I wouldn't have tried a Philly cheesesteak in Philadelphia, which was divine, and I'm trying to replicate, and I wouldn't have tried the Boston cream pie. I probably would have tried the Boston cream pie. But I don't think anything can replace some of those memories when you're surrounded by good cooks. I have grown up around a grandmother who made pie crust that would make you cry. My mother can make bread that will call you for miles around. And this treat is one that I had with my great-grandpa in Swan Valley, and he would pick the raspberries out of his yard. I hope he didn't go milk a cow for the cream, and they never told me that. I prefer mine to buy mine out of the store, but I love to tell my children that when we sit around the table and share stories. So I hope that through taste you try to create a deeper sensoryscape for living. Smell is the next one. It's one of my favorites. The word that I've put with smell is memories. And because of the way we smell, it goes right here, and it goes to the limbic brain, and I'm not an expert at the body, but it goes there first before we process it up here. And we have an immediate reaction to some kind of a memory that smell's coded to. And I want to introduce you to my town. If you were to come there in September, you would smell one of the most amazing smells ever, and that is the smell of potato harvest. And we're a small little town, but we do potatoes well. And it covers, the sheen of dirt and dust just covers the town from September to October. But that smell just contains, when I smell it every September, first of all, I'm thankful that I have a college degree, so I don't have to go work in it anymore. But second of all, I remember all of the good memories, and they remind me a lot of my dad, who has worked in that his whole life and has loved it. The last one in smell is vinegar taffy, and my grandmother taught me how to make it. It's an old candy, and when you boil the vinegar, it gets really acrid, and it'll even kind of burn your nostrils if you stand over the pot. But when it gets done, it's this clear, kind of yellowish looking goo, and you have to let it cool for a little bit, and then you start to pull it. And when I stand there to pull it, and I smell that smell, I'm taken back to watching my grandmother's hands pull that over and over again. It's a very vivid memory, and it's one that I try to recreate every Christmas because she did that for me. So I hope that you will pay attention to the memories that smell creates in your life. Sound is kind of cool, and I don't have time to focus on everything that I want to, but I want to kind of hit on two quick things for you with sound, and that is how music can create such an emotional response. And so I ascribed the word with sound. I put feelings. I probably should have said emotion. But I love what the poet John Dryden said: what passion can music raise and quell? And the reason why it's a little bit different than words is that with words, once we process them, it can cause emotion, but we also have to comprehend them. When we hear a note, we just feel. And I love all of the sounds that I grew up hearing. There were so many. When I go to my grandma's, she loved old-time music. You could find a banjo, violin, fiddles, mandolin. They had a player piano that we could put rolls on and sing Tennessee Waltz and 5 Foot 2 Eyes of Blue and all kinds of cool things. But sound has really created a powerful sensoryscape in my life. And a couple years ago, my husband and I did a comedy tour because all these comedians were coming close to Idaho Falls area. And we went to Pocatello and heard Brian Regan. We went to Boise and heard Jerry Seinfeld. We went to St. George and heard Bill Cosby, and just had such a great year, and we never knew that we could laugh so hard. So I want to kind of give that to you in just a little bit.
The worst day that was the day the science project was due. Waking up that morning, that was fun, huh? Yeah. Your head'd pop off your pillow. Oh no. That's due today. I had 9 months to work on it, I did nothing. I have a cardboard box. A boxing.
I'm glad you laughed, thank you. He was so funny, but Jerry Seinfeld was our favorite. Like when we left, my stomach hurt and my husband was wheezing, and it was just great. And I think you need to have experiences like that. The next one that I'm going to play you, though, has become one of our new favorites, and I think because of our extremely busy life and chasing 2 busy kids and all that we're trying to do, This one has just felt appropriate that we listen to it at night when we're worn out and tired and cleaning up dishes and the kids are in bed. But I love the peace and calm that it gives us, and it's from the Piano Guys. But when we heard them again this time that they came to BYU Idaho, Stephen Sharp played this song all by himself, and I've fallen in love with the cello, and I may, if I'm brave, go and try and learn it someday. But I just want you to feel that peace that we feel when we hear this one. I love that it ends with him smiling, because that's how he plays the whole time, with a smile on his face and his eyes closed. And I often wonder, what is he thinking? But I hope as you heard these pieces, you felt something, because I think that music can create in us deeper sensoryscapes. Last one, when we look at sight and think about sight and even sound, we're really inundated with both of those senses. And I think it's kind of interesting that I tried to ascribe the word observe to it, because we see so much, but do we really see the things that are around us? So I encourage you to think about a few things. First of all, I hope that you will see like a child with joy and wonder. I love that picture. They were at the circus, and it just captured the magical, innocence of childhood. And I hope that we look at the images around us that way. What objects do you have around you, and what kind of meaning do they give to your life? And this is a picture of my grandpa's glove. He lived to be 99, and he worked clear until he died, and he would go out even into his little flower bed, and he would put his glove on this thing when he got done. And that was the only thing that my cousin wanted, because he wanted to remember how hardworking my grandpa was. So I encourage you to think about the objects you have around you. I also encourage you to slow down. I like to take pictures of the sunset, and that's my view out my back window almost every night if I'm paying attention. And I try to pay attention to that, because I really think we really need to look at the beauty that's around us. In conclusion, I was at a Virginia Beach craft fair, and I came across this lady who painted these pictures. And I was mesmerized, and I felt like I had seen my mind on canvas. And it's been fun, as I've prepared for this, to interact with her and ask for permission to show it. But she captured something so deep inside that I was just mesmerized and drawn to her work. So I asked him, as I finish this up, what are you going to be doing based upon your sensory moments that you have happen? Last year I was an attendee to this, and I loved every second of it. I loved what I heard, what I saw, what I ate, everything. And now I'm up here speaking because of that moment. And if I hadn't gone, I might not be here. And I just want to end saying there are so many benefits that we can have from creating sensoryscapes. And I think they're ones that we don't have time to share. But if you will really honestly think about those experiences, that your life will be enriched and deep. I thank you for your attention and hope you enjoyed what I presented.